After the successful inaugural running of the ACL race series, Hyundai ACL Racing Tasmania Enduro last year, this year's Enduro was moved down to Baskerville and extended by 20 minutes. Early morning qualifying was held in extremely gusty conditions. The regular Tassie XL drivers were up first, and it was a familiar name at the top of the timesheets. Current championship leader Jackson Shaw put his Shaw Motorsport XL on pole nearly half a second quicker than last year's champion Jeremy Bennett. Third was Will Blair, who narrowly edged out Damien Midgley, then the rest of the field. The co-drivers, or driver Bs, were up next, and it was team sensation Ollie Wickham in Will Blair's car who snatched pole from Max Gagan in Jackson Shaw's car. Third was Ryan Phillips in Jeremy Bennett's car. The same top three cars topping both sessions, just in a different order. The rest of the driver B field was separated by even less time than the regular runners. Race 1, and it was back to the regular XL runners. At the start of the second lap, Blair began dropping back, his XL struggling for straight line speed at varying times around the lap. Up front, Bennett and Shaw were doing what they did all last year, running side by side and barely separated by a couple of tenths of a second. Behind them, Pruer found some extra pace from qualifying and applied the pressure to Midgley. Midgley holding on to third by just 0.3 of a second. Race 1 for the B drivers was up next. Gagan got by Wickham, who then came under attack from Charlie Parker and Ryan Phillips. Behind them was the trio of Josh Webster, John Madigan and Matthew Totani. Wickham picked up the pace but couldn't make a move on Gagan. Further back, Totani put on a great last lap pass around the outside of former state champion Josh Webster to claim 5th by just 0.05 of a second. The Wickham-Blair car's up and down pace was traced back to a brake piston dust seal that was sticking in the caliper. Race 2 for the regular drivers, and it was once again Shaw and Bennett running side by side and nose to tail out in front vying for the win. Blair now had pace to burn in his repaired XL, and he battled his way past Pruer and Midgley into 3rd. Behind this trio was Rick Burt, who was having a good run in his RBMM Vehicle Transport XL. Unfortunately for him, the front wheel bearing failed and destroyed the hub, drive shaft and brake caliper. With not enough spares to fix it, he and co-driver Brian Adkins were sadly out of the rest of the weekend. After a disappointing race 1 by his standards, everyone's favourite dummy grid marshal, Paul Giddings, decided he was going to send it for Driver B's race 2. Send it he did. Despite Giddings limping the XL back to the pits, the track was littered in debris and the race was red flagged. Giddings was taken to hospital, but fortunately injuries were minor. The car, however, was a write-off. The race resumed behind the safety car and would see a great scrap with all the cars evenly matched. On the penultimate lap, Phillips tried to outbrake Wickham but locked up, the pair making slight side-to-side contact, sending both cars sideways across the track and scattering those behind them. The biggest beneficiaries were Madigan and Webster, who managed to grab a couple of places each. There were a few changes this year from last year's Enduro. The time had been increased from 60 minutes to 80 minutes plus one lap. Driver changes had to occur between 35 and 45 minutes into the race. Pit stops now included 3 minutes of stationary time, while refueling was still strictly prohibited. Out of the 8 cars starting the Enduro, only 2 had their regular drivers starting. They were Axelsen in the orange number 55 car and Stagg in the 666. The pace from the start was intense, the drivers treating the opening laps as a sprint race. Wickham once again dropped back, his car struggling for pace in the opening laps, dropping to 6th after starting on the front row. Parker pressured Phillips for second, which allowed Gagan to stretch the lead in the black Shaw Motorsport car. Wickham started putting his foot down and closed back onto the cars in front. First he'd dispatch Totani and a lap later would squeeze by Phillips. Wickham was pushing hard to make up for the time he lost on the opening laps, while Totani began applying the pressure to Phillips. Wickham then got by Parker and into second, and set after Gagan, who had opened up a handy 5-second or so lead. Totani had found some pace and was looking everywhere to get by Phillips. Wickham was the fastest car on track, consistently lapping nearly a second quicker than Gagan. On lap 16, he took the lead and set about extending it as much as he could before the pit stops. Totani caught back up to Phillips and was much racier than the number 46 XL. Totani ended up making an excellent round the outside move on Phillips, who tried to retake the position with an optimistic move into the skyline corner at the top of the hill. Contact left the Totani Midgley car with rear suspension damage. He was forced to pit, with the team to decide if the car could be repaired. At the same time was the first major call of the day, a drive-through penalty for the number 10 Shaw Motorsport car. The team had refueled the car on the dummy grid, breaching the SUP regs for the event, not an Enduro-specific rule. This dropped the team to 4th, just behind Phillips, with Wickham extending his lead from Parker. Right on the 35-minute mark, Phillips was the first to pit on lap 32. Bennett had been the only driver to lead home the Shaw Motorsport car, so the team opted to put him in the car at the earliest opportunity. A typical lap around Baskerville is 65 seconds, so the 3-minute stationary time in the pits would drop competitors a few laps down. Also pitting was Stagg and Axelson, opting to put their co-drivers in for a slightly longer stint. On lap 35, Gagan pitted to change over to Shaw, the current lap record holder at Baskerville. Wickham and Parker continued to stay out. Their times from the previous sessions had been slightly quicker than their co-drivers, and they were subsequently going closer to the 45-minute maximum stint time. Shaw emerged just ahead of Bennett, the pair separated by a couple of tenths, which had been the norm every race last year. Wickham pitted on lap 39 and conversed with Blair, passing on a potential problem with the complete electrical and data car.
These cars have done 38 laps.
In a great showing of sportsmanship, Craig Twining graciously offered up the rear suspension from his written-off car to the Midgley Totani team, who managed to get the number 79 XL back out into the race, albeit multiple laps down. Blair resumed the lead, however something wasn't right with the car. It became apparent Blair couldn't select certain gears and his pace rapidly dropped off. Pruer caught the wounded Blair, who moved over and allowed Pruer into the lead. A couple of laps later, Shaw and Bennett caught Blair, and he opted to retire the wounded car. Pruer was now leading Shaw and Bennett by 10 seconds, both following drivers pushing hard and closing the gap. A slight error by Shaw allowed Bennett into second, however both cars were lapping a couple of tenths a lap faster than leader Pruer. On lap 53, Bennett took the lead from Pruer. Half a lap later, Shaw also got past Pruer and moved into second. Further back, Webster passed Peacock and moved into 4th place. Bennett caught Peacock at an inopportune time, which allowed Shaw to close. The 2024 championship rivals, never separated by more than a few tenths, were now separated by less than a car length after an hour's worth of racing. Shaw broke late and got alongside Bennett, holding the inside for the next corner. Both drivers now throwing their cars round on overheating tyres, desperately trying to get in front of each other to lead that final lap. A missed apex for Shaw going into Calvin's allowed Bennett up the inside. However, he held on to the outside, which became the inside for turn 1. Bennett now went deep, bravely holding the outside, which became the inside for the second part of the S's. Two of the best XL racers in the state were throwing everything at each other. This time Bennett missed the Calvin's Corner apex. Only a handful of minutes remaining. Neither had won the first Enduro, so it was all or nothing. Could either driver gain an advantage? A subtle cough from the shore car. The fuel tank was almost empty. He was now suffering from fuel surge round the corners. Bennett was clear. With just 3 laps remaining, Digney put a move on Peacock for 5th, while Pruitt caught and passed Shaw for 2nd. On the penultimate lap, Digney spun right in front of race leader Bennett. He lost a heap of time and lost 5th to Peacock. Bennett was left to cruise to a 17-second win from Pruitt and Shaw. Post-race, Bennett's car was 4 kilos over the minimum weight. However, he and Phillips were handed a 10-second penalty for the contact between Phillips and Totani. The official result, therefore, was Bennett and Phillips, 7-second winners from Pruitt and Parker, with the unlucky Shaw and Gagan in 3rd. It was another enthralling enduro thanks to ACL Race Bearings and Hyundai Excel Racing Tasmania. We can't wait for the next one.